Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo-O. Super glad that we are together and we get to get in the Word today. It's November 8th, 7:41 in the morning, so a little earlier than kind of normal for me, but I was up and ready to get into the Word. So these are my devotions that I put live for everybody. To follow along. I literally go through the Bible in my devotion. Yeah, that's what I do, is I just go through it. And it's amazing. If you just go through a little at a time, you'll get to the end. That's right. So it's pretty cool. And there's a lot of answers to our questions about God when we go through the Bible in this way of just kind of walking through it. So many times people just touch base with certain parts of the Bible and they kind of lose track of really or just don't have the full picture. So it's nice to be able to get the full picture, understand how God's moving in the world, and perhaps, we'll understand why God's moving in our life in similar ways as well. So Psalm 78 is a large psalm. It's a psalm of Asaph. And we've done some of these before, meaning these songs of Asaph. So you could always check out the archives at my YouTube channel at Bo Willette. Just check out, that's the name right there, Bo Willette. Type that in the search bar and you'll get to all the different books of the Bible that I've done in a devotion style. So Psalm 78, very cool. It says, "O my people, listen to my instructions. Open your ears to what I am saying, for I will speak to you a parable. I will teach you hidden lessons from our past." Okay, so cool. I get it. It's about the kind of things from the past, and we've kind of gone over this before, that a lot of times in our discouragement, it's great to look at how what God's done in the past to help us, especially in our insecurities. Sometimes we can be really insecure or fearful about something that's up ahead. And the Bible tends to always point us back to the work of God. So for instance, like looking back even 2,000 years ago to the time of Jesus and going, man, Jesus died for me, right? And reading about what Jesus said about what he was doing, that he's come to give his life as a ransom for many, that his life would be that offering for the sins of the people. And that he lays down his life for his friends, for us. This kind of idea can help me kind of bring it into the future or to the present and go like, hey, God is for me. How do I know? Because I can look back. So it's the same kind of idea here, right? For I speak to you in a parable. Did Jesus speak in parables? Yeah. Is this the first time we've heard this term parable in the Bible? I think so. I don't think we've ever actually heard the word parable being used, but here it's used. So it's kind of something maybe for us to just kind of perk up about. First mentions are pretty cool in the Bible. First mentions of love, first mention of maybe hate, first mention of God, things like that might be very neat and something to really neat in the sense that they mean something. It's something important for us to glean from, look at. So I will speak to you in a parable. And Jesus taught in parables quite a bit. I will teach you hidden lessons from our past. So parables, I guess, tend to have this little insight of hiddenness, right? And there's something there. There's something that should draw us to it, to the lesson to be learned. And that's what it says, hidden lessons. It says, stories we have heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will let the next generation, or tell the next generation about what? About the glorious deeds of the Lord. So this is something that obviously this song or this psalm is really right up there with the book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Bible. I think it's chapter 6 that talks about parents teaching their children, right, about God and about God's marvelous deliverance from the mighty hand of Pharaoh. So this kind of reiterates that point of already the Word of God. It's not an addition to it. It's just reiterating the important things to remember, right? And that's pretty good. Sometimes our world is just filled with a lot of things to kind of remember, stay in touch with those really important things in life. And so this is for our children, that we would tell the next generation. Good question to us this morning. Do I share with the next generation? Is the next generation in my life at all? Do I have any input into the next generation's world? And if not, why? Why is the next generation not in my life? There could be valid reasons, by the way. But we have to think through that. It's one of those commands in the Bible that's pretty beneficial to our world. What if our world forgets things like Hitler, right? Adolf Hitler and what he did? Then the world starts becoming maybe they forget about the incredible hatred towards Israel. And you start having a lot of Jew haters out there. It's kind of weird. Our world's kind of like that now, right? Where we have a lot of people that tend to hate, but maybe they've just forgotten, or maybe they never were taught about things in the past. Could be. It says, he commanded our ancestors to teach them to the children, so the next generation might know them, even the children yet not born. Yet they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set up its hope anew in God. Isn't that cool? So everybody has a fresh outlook of God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. Then they will not be like their ancestors, stubborn, rebellious, and unfaithful, refusing to give their hearts to God. So it's really important to give the new generation hope in what God's done, give them an understanding of our testimony in God, how God has changed our lives, what God has done in our minds to make us think differently, things like that. Really pouring into that next generation, that new generation. The ideas of kind of what, again, the work of God in our life. And it says, it admits that, I love this, it says it admits that their ancestors were stubborn, rebellious, unfaithful, refusing to give their hearts to God. So that's the idea. So we don't want another generation to be stubborn, rebellious, refusing to give their hearts to God. And maybe that there's a reason why today people's hearts are stubborn and rebellious and not wanting to give their hearts to God. Maybe it's because of us. Maybe we haven't done a good job of teaching them. So sometimes when we're blaming other people and blaming the other generation, maybe really we have to look within and go, did I really do the right thing anyway? Did I really share with the generation, my kids? Did I really pour into them the Word of God? And sometimes that can be convicting, but it's the responsible thing to do, because it really makes us have to look at our own self, our own stuff, our own yuck, that a lot of times we just don't want to look at. It's much easier, to be on the golf course and blaming some people. Man, those people over the seas, they're really crazy. Oh man, those people are nuts too. Hey, hit the ball, and that kind of idea, instead of really taking time and going, you know what, maybe we messed up, guys. Maybe we messed up, girls. Maybe we didn't do the right thing, and that's a lot of what we're seeing. Yeah. And so it says, the warriors of Ephraim, though armed with bows, turned their backs and fled on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant and refused to live by his instructions. So it points out a moment in history of the tribe of Ephraim and their failure to hang in there during wartime, right? They fled. Was there ever a time I just didn't really stay in the fight? I didn't stay in the battle, that I kind of pulled away? I kind of shied away. I kind of feared away. I kind of insecured away. I discontented away. I angered away. I resented away. Is there a time that I just ran away instead of really staying in that battle, fighting that good fight? That's a New Testament idea. Fight the good fight. Hey, Timothy, Paul says, fight that good fight, bro. Stay in there. Don't just give up. A lot of people want to give up on church. Oh, man, the church this, church that, blah, blah. Complain, right? It's stuck in the book of Numbers. A lot of complaining. And you forget that, man, hey, that's where we have to fight the good fight. We have to deal with each other, and we have to deal with ourselves, and that can be challenging. They forget what he had done, the Ephraim tribe. They forget wonders shown to them, the miracles he did for their ancestors on the plain of Zoan in the land of Egypt. For he divided the sea and led them through, making the water stand up like walls. In the daytime he led them by a cloud, and at night by a pillar of fire. So we know that the Red Sea is described not just in Exodus, but in other places in the Psalms as quite a lot of water. So when someone says, hey, the Red Sea only had 2 inches of water, it really wasn't that big of a miracle, well, that just flies in the face of every passage in the Bible on the Red Sea, right? Notice it stood up like walls. Okay, well, my wall in my house is, 8 feet, something like that. So, I don't know, unless it's a 2-foot wall. It just doesn't seem too powerful. And me being a guy who surfed a lot in SoCal and lived in Hawaii, a 2-foot wave is kind of small and manageable, but an 8-foot wave, now we're starting to get a little nervous, right? 12-foot wave, yikes, right? Man, if you're going bigger than that, wow, get ready to duck, man, and die. It's scary. So it says, in the daytime, God led, right, the people by cloud, at night, and pillar of fire, or a cloud during the daytime, pillar of fire at night. We read that throughout the Exodus and the different books in Torah, right? The first 5 books of the Bible. He split open the rocks in the wilderness to give them water from the gushing spring. So this is all things that have been spoken of in the Bible. If you just picked up the Bible, though, and read Psalm 78, you wouldn't even know what it's being talked about. You wouldn't understand it. But we've already gone through the book, so we understand Moses struck the rock, and the rock brought forth water. We see that God's done this before. And so we understand that there's a narrative behind everything that's being said here in this song. So this song is really about the past, about God's faithfulness. And it says in verse 16, he made streams pour from the rock, making the waters flow down like a river. Yet they kept on sinning against him, rebelling against the Most High in the desert. They stubbornly tested God in their hearts, demanding the foods they craved. They even spoke against God himself, saying, God can't give us food in the wilderness. Yes, he can strike a rock so water gushes out, but he can't give his people bread and meat. When the Lord heard them, he was furious. The fire of his wrath burned against Jacob. Yes, his anger rose against Israel, for they did not believe God or trust him to care for them. Do I trust God to care for me? That's a good question, right? This psalm brings up that point, Or do I complain about everything that I have and where I'm at? Do I just complain constantly about, I want something better, I want something greater, I want something better, different, or am I just content? Can I be okay? It's a big question. Do I really believe God is caring for me? Do I really look at things that way? In verse 23, but he commands the skies to open. He opened the doors of heaven. He rained down manna for them to eat. He gave them bread from heaven. They ate food, the food of angels. Interesting, manna, the food of angels. That's quite trippy. God gave them all they could hold. He released the east wind in the heavens and guided the south wind by his mighty powers. He rained down meat as thick as dust, birds as plentiful as the sand on the seashore. Interesting. He rained down meat as thick as dust. I don't know what that exactly means. He caused the birds to fall within their camp and all around their tents. Now, manna means, what is it? So when I say, what is this? What is it all about? It's because manna means that. What is this stuff? Right? Interesting. And so the people ate their fill, and he gave them what they craved. God might give you what you want, but before they satisfied their craving, while the meat was yet in their mouths, the anger of God arose against them, and he killed their strongest men. He struck down the finest of Israel's young men. But in spite of this, the people kept sinning. Despite his wonders, they refused to trust him. Even though God might allow and give us what we want, we still might be the most stubborn people to still not trust God's care for us. Gosh, it's amazing how the heart's like that. Where even when we get our way, we're not getting our way. It's crazy how that works. We always are unsatisfied. Never satisfied at all. Going to this, going to that, trying this, trying that. I'm bored with this, I'm bored with that. Just a continual moving on. We cannot stay just satisfied. Now God says, hey, I can satisfy you. You know, remember that one psalm, taste and see that I am good, right? God's beckoning us to come to him. But yet the psalmist in Asaph in Psalm 78 is just reviewing the history of his people. And notice it's not a rah, rah, rah. It's a, right? It's a, uh-oh. It's a, oh man, dude, we kind of mess up a ton. And that's so true about our own personal lives, isn't it? We look at our past, and some people are like, rah, 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 I'm so great. And then there's the realist, where we look at our life and we go, I got some potential, but boy, there's some areas that certainly could use some fixing up. And this is how this song kind of goes. It says in verse 33, so he ended their lives in failure, their years in terror. When God began killing them, they finally sought him. They repented and took God seriously. Our world needs to take God seriously, doesn't it? What's going to be the change before our world starts taking God seriously? We can get stubborn still and be like, nope, not going to listen to God. Hey, I've been there before, for sure. Where you just, no. And you're just going to, instead, you'll trust your professor. You'll trust that person in the university. You'll trust this other person, that other person on YouTube, instead of listening to God. We become foolish. And it says, then they remembered that God was their rock. They finally remembered. Finally, we wake up, right? Finally, our eyes are open and we go, oh my gosh, that's right. Cursed is the one who trusts in man. That's right. I'm trusting in human beings. Boy, what a mess up that is, right? A ruckus. It's a mess because humans will fail. They finally remember the rock, the solid foundation, right? That God the Most High was their Redeemer. Whoa, this is so cool. The themes of Jesus. What does Jesus do when he teaches? He shows us our sin, right? You say that you never murdered before. Have you ever had hate in your heart? Yep, that's what Jesus taught, right? You got hate in your heart. Man, guess what you got in there? You got the beginnings of some murder, Have you ever lusted after someone? You got the start of some adultery going on, It's like that kind of thing. And that's what the psalmist is doing. He's pointing out the people's sin. He's teaching them that, man, we become stubborn. We need to focus on how God has changed us, moved us, brought us to a better place. And so they talk about God being a redeemer, one who buys out of slavery. But all they gave him was lip service. They lied to him with their tongues. Their hearts were not loyal to him. They did not keep his covenant. Yet he was merciful and forgave their sins and did not destroy them all. Many times he held back his anger and did not unleash his fury, for he remembered that they were merely mortal, gone like a breath of wind that never returns. Man, what a crazy verses, huh? That God could have destroyed us, but he was what? Merciful, right? He held back. God is rich in what? Mercy. He holds back his wrath from us. Jesus is the one who takes our wrath. Pretty radical, right? He is our substitution for the wrath, to take the wrath of the Father. Yeah, the wrath of the Father's on us stubborn people, right? And yet Jesus says, I'm going to take the wrath that you deserve. That fury, the wrath of God, unleashing his fury. It says, oh, how often they rebelled against him in the wilderness and grieved his heart in that day, in that wasteland, in that dry wasteland. Again and again they tested God's patience and provoked the Holy One of Israel. They did not remember his powers and how he rescued them from their enemies. They did not remember his miracles, signs in Egypt, his wonders in the plain of Zoan. For he turned the rivers into blood so that no one could drink from the streams. He sent vast swarms of flies to consume them and hordes of frogs to ruin them. He gave their crops to caterpillars. Their harvest was consumed by locusts. He destroyed their grapevines with hail and shattered their sycamore figs with sleet. He abandoned their cattle to the hail, their livestock to bolts of lightning. He loosed on them his fierce anger, all of his fury, rage, and hostility. He dispatched against them a band of destroying angels. He turned his anger against them. He did not spare the Egyptians' lives, but ravaged them with the plague. He killed the oldest son in each Egyptian family. Hey, was it one? This is an answer, right, to a question. Hey, when the firstborns were put to death in the deliverance of the people of Israel from the hand of Pharaoh, was it just the sons or was it daughters and sons? Or here it just says the eldest son. So we get an answer in Psalm 78. It says, the flower of youth throughout the land of Egypt, but he led his own people like a flock of sheep, guiding them safely through the wilderness. The deliverer, the good shepherd, right? You get that picture. God is what? The good shepherd. He's the one who delivers the people. See, all these New Testament pictures that you have of Jesus are in this psalm, right? He is the deliverer. He is the teacher. He is the one who's helping us understand our need for sin. But he's the one who's merciful, right? That he doesn't give us his wrath. Instead, he gives us his friendship, his kindness, right? And he leads us like a good shepherd to the place of peace. And so we see that. It says in verse, 53, he kept them safe so that they were not afraid, but the sea covered their enemies. He brought them to the border of his holy land, to the land of hills he had won for them. He drove out the nations before them, and he gave them their inheritance by lot. He settled the tribes in Israel into their homes. So, hey, Israel gets a homeland, right? The promised land. Well, Jesus puts us into our promised land as well. He brings us into the kingdom. Isn't that cool? So we see a lot of parallels here now in this psalm to a lot of what the New Testament teaches, because it's the same stuff, right? It's the same ideas. It's all rooted in those really first 5 books of the Bible. But they kept testing and rebelling against God Most High. They did not obey his laws. They turned back and were faithless as their parents. They were as undependable as a crooked bow. They angered God by building shrines to other gods. They made him jealous with their idols. And when God heard them, he was very angry, and he completely rejected Israel. And he abandoned his dwelling at Shiloh, the tabernacle where he lived among his people. He allowed the ark of his might to be captured, but he surrendered his glory into enemy hands. He gave the people over to be butchered by the sword because he was so angry with his own people, his special possession. So what does God do? He in a sense lets Israel do what they want to do. They want to rebel from God. They want to turn away from God. They want to go their own way. And God says, okay, you go do that. And it's interesting. God living with the people, God dwelling with Israel. That's the idea of those first 5 books of the Bible. Even a little further, right? Maybe the first 7 books of the Bible. But you get that idea that God is dwelling with Israel in this promised land, but Israel cannot take it. They do not want to stay with God. They become unsatisfied, complaining, and they forget God's deliverance from that bondage they were in as slaves to Egypt. They forget what it was like to be without God. And so they go their own way. A lot of times we're like that. We forget what it was like to be without God. Remember what it was like? Remember how fun it was? I'm being facetious, right? Yeah, it's like it wasn't fun at all. It's like, man, a lot of issues. And man, when we came to Christ, God, and our eyes were open to that forgiveness that Jesus offered us, boy, that was huge, wasn't it? That I'm forgiven, that God loves me, that he accepts me, that I don't need to earn his acceptance, that he just loves me, that I can find some rest there. Even after all we've done, all of our rebellion, we might think we need to earn our stairway to heaven, but you can't do it, right? No, by grace we have been saved through faith. And so we see that these people have turned, right? They forgot about the good work of God. It says in verse 63, their young men were killed by fire, their young women died before singing their wedding songs, their priests were slaughtered, and their widows could not mourn their deaths. Then the Lord rose up as though walking from sleep, like a warrior aroused from a drunken stupor, and he routed his enemies and sent them to eternal shame. I love that. God's depicted as someone who rises from his sleep, from his drunken stupor. Isn't that amazing? What a song. God rises from his drunken stupor and goes and gets them, Even when the people of Israel rebel from God and go their way, they are that special possession. It says in this, Israel is a special possession. It just said that. And so God is going to come to their rescue. And so he routs his enemies and sent them to eternal shame. So we're talking about an eternity here. Something about eternity. When we're dealing with God, we're dealing with things of eternal consequences. But he rejected Joseph's descendants. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim. He chose instead the tribe of Judah and Mount Zion, which he loved. And there he built his sanctuary as high as the heavens. Talking about God rescuing that southern tribe, those southern tribes of Israel. And it says, there he built his sanctuary as high as the heavens, as solid and enduring as the earth. He chose his servant David, calling him from the sheep pens. He took David from tending the ewes and lambs, and made him a shepherd of Jacob's descendants. God's own people, Israel, he cared for them with a true heart and led them with skillful hands. So David really had a heart for Israel. We see that. And that's really cool that it gives us a little insight into David. David, a guy who really was skillful, really thoughtful in his, if you will, his rulership. And that's cool to see. So, we see a lot of our life in that psalm. It is a big psalm, but it really goes over kind of our life in a lot of ways. Moving away, being stubborn from God, turning away from God, maybe not wanting God in life, and then coming to God and seeing and realizing God's so merciful. Seeing the blessings of God in life, but then sometimes growing complacent and then going a different direction again. Really, Psalm 78 is about, a wandering, waving soul. right? A soul that just keeps wandering and waving back and forth, being tossed to and fro, going in different directions, not really staying focused on the Lord. Though from God's perspective, God continues to be faithful. He sees Israel as that precious possession, and he goes to war for Israel. Though Israel continues to be stubborn, God gives them a king, gives them a good king, gives them a king that really does love them. And yet, it doesn't seem to always work out so well. So this is how a lot of our lives are. And this is why the New Testament passages even tell us that when we are faithless, he remains faithful. God is faithful. So we read that throughout the New Testament as well. The faithfulness of God. God is faithful. You might not be too faithful. You might be a person who's kind of actually, maybe kind of not so real. Maybe try to hide behind a lot of things. But yet God's faithful, And it's a call really for the people of Israel, the song is, to turn upward, to come back, to really have this idea of repentance, coming back to that relationship with God. Coming back to that, God, you know what? I want to listen to you. I'm no longer going to listen to me kind of thing. So it's a cool psalm. It's a big song. It goes over a lot of the history of Israel, especially during the time of the Exodus. And that's cool. A lot of good songs out there in our world, when we put them on, are about things of the past, right? Things that people remember that they're singing about, that wonderful person they loved, whatever it is. But that's how a lot of songs go. It's a reminder, of a better time, maybe. What was that song, Bryan Adams, The Summer of '69, talking about those good old days, what it was like, things like that. I think of like John Cougar Mellencamp tunes that are very much like that. Back in the day, this kind of nostalgic summer that we had, this awesome time. Remember that, remember the good times. Remember, well, that's kind of the idea, remembering all the good stuff God's done. So there's nothing new in the sun, under the sun. People still sing about the same things today, kind of doing the same format of songwriting, if you will. So it's been going on a long time. Anyway, fight the good fight. So you guys have a good one. You guys take care. Stay in the game, right? And that's important. Stay there. Fight that good fight. Don't just, run away. Don't just run away. Stay there. That's the idea here, right? As well in the psalm. So you guys take care. Have a great one. Thanks for hanging with me on a long devotion. Bye-bye.